everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm reviewing the new album from A Perfect Circle, Eat the Elephant. It is finally here, the new A Perfect Circle album. This is one of those albums that people have been anticipating for years now. The last Perfect Circle album came out in 2004, and that was an album that was mostly covers. So really the last album of completely original content was in 2003. That's a long time ago, to say the least. And of course the band has been reformed for a while, touring, putting out like some live albums. I think the Greatest Hits album as well they put out in the time between their last full length and now. But none of that really compares to getting a whole set of brand new songs. And all I could say about this album going into it was that I was a bit concerned because with great hype comes great disappointment if it's not that good in the end. But at the same time, I did like some of the singles going into this thing, so I was expecting it to at least be decent. But overall, I have to say that this is a great album that was very much worth the wait. Eat the Elephant is definitely a very mellow album. If you're a fan of heavier music and you're expecting a heavy project from A Perfect Circle here, you're not gonna find it, unfortunately. But it doesn't necessarily make this thing bad. In fact, I really like the more mellow feel this album has going for it. And I mean, Perfect Circle aren't exactly the heaviest band around anyway. I mean, they did have some heavier tracks on their older albums, like Pet, for example, but those were the exception, really, not the rule. Much of their music was very mellow as well, and this album really is just that all coming together. It's just very mellow throughout. There are maybe some more aggressive moments here or there, but even then, they're not that aggressive in the grand scheme of music. Lyrically, the album deals a lot with modern social, political, and issues like that. And in today's climate, it's definitely not an uncommon thing to talk about that in your music. But I feel lots of times, lots of artists, they just regurgitate very generic messages, stuff that you've heard a million times before, and as a result, the music suffers. But A Perfect Circle here delivers some lyrics that are, I think, pretty interesting overall. I like the track The Doomed, which is the first single from this thing. I really liked that song when it came out, and I like it, I think, even more in the context of this record. Lyrically, kind of talking about the doomed, pretty much, the good people, the poor, all these groups, and how, they're pretty much doomed because of the rich, and all those, the bad people pretty much are just kind of holding them down to some extent. And it's kind of a play on, I believe it's a biblical story, where I think it was Jesus or someone like that in the Bible said that those poor people, the meek, all those people are gonna, get rewarded or something along those lines. And this is kind of playing on that, as it's quite the opposite with how it's playing out in today's society. Those people are suffering, whereas the rich, the opposite people to those, pretty much are the ones who are succeeding, pretty much. I thought that was a very interesting take on that, and I thought the structure of the song itself musically was also very interesting. How it definitely has its slower parts as well, but this is easily one of the tracks on the album that has the most aggression to it, I guess you would say, especially towards the end. It just has a very angry climactic release right at the end, which I thought was very good, especially after the build-up that's the rest of the song itself. But it does also have its mellow moments, which I also enjoyed. It's probably one of my favorite cuts on this album, and it's overall just a very great song that you need to check out. The track that follows it, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, was one that initially I was a bit conflicted on how I felt about it. It's easily one of the more, I guess, upbeat sounding songs on this thing, but it's not quite upbeat in a genuine way. I feel like there's a bit of sarcasm to this song, at least with how it just feels overall. But I think I really like this song with repeated listens. I like how catchy it is. I do like how it uses the more laid-back feel of the album to have this very kind of somewhat upbeat feel to it, but at the same time, like I mentioned before, it's not really all that upbeat. If you kind of look into the lyrics more and what's really going on, it definitely has a bit of a sarcastic feel going for it. But I really like the track overall. And the track Talk Talk is another good one. Lyrically, kind of talking about how lots of the people that go around saying to act like Jesus and things of that sort are the exact same people who don't act like him in real life. I thought that was a very interesting idea, something that artists have tapped into that before. They're not the first, but I feel like the way that they portrayed it here was very well done with how, just comparing how these people don't exactly live up to what they claim that, you should be or what they should be. Yeah, I thought it was a great execution of that concept overall. I like the overall sound and feel of the track as well. Also, another one of the more aggressive moments on this album. If you've heard that track and the Doomed, I know those were some of the singles released early on from this thing. Those are pretty much as aggressive as you're going to get here on this project. If you're kind of unsure as to what I mean by saying this is a more mellow album overall. But that's not a bad thing by any means, like I said before. The track Hourglass is one that I could see dividing fans because it's definitely a very interesting track to say the least. It has a more electronic feel to it. There's parts where the vocals are just kind of manipulated to have this very robotic feel to them, but I feel like, of course, that's all intentional. It definitely has this sort of electronic, maybe even industrial sound to it, not in a super heavy way, even though it is probably one of the heavier songs on this album overall. But like I said, this is a very laid-back, soft album, so that's not really saying all too much. And it was definitely a track that I was a bit conflicted on as well on my initial listens of this thing, but with time I think it grew on me a bit more, and just listening to it on its own, as well as in the context of the record, it's a pretty solid song in my opinion. It's probably not one of my favorites on this thing overall, but once you get past the initial, robotic vocal effects and just more electronic sound of it, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the song that's worth getting into. The vocals on this project sound great. Maynard sounds fantastic throughout this thing. He's one of my favorite just vocalists, just overall in general in music, I guess you could say. And I think his voice sounds very good throughout this album. He's definitely able to convey a lot of the emotions that are needed to be delivered throughout this thing, whether that be sadness or sarcasm or anger on tracks like The Doomed or Talk Talk, for example. He's able to deliver a wide array of emotions, which is something I've always liked about him and his singing, and he's able to pull that off here on this project very well. As for the instrumentation on this thing, like I've been saying throughout this review, it's very mellow. I sound like a broken record at this point, but that's really all there is to it. There's lots of more laid-back sounding guitars throughout this thing. Lots of pianos as well. I was a bit surprised by just how much pianos you're going to hear throughout this project, but in a good way. I like how it sounds overall. It's definitely not a very aggressive project, so if you're looking for, something like Pet or Judith, you're not going to find it here. But if you are a fan of the more mellow, laid-back, A Perfect Circle, like some of the cuts on those other albums that were released earlier were, I think you're really going to like this project overall. What I'm trying to get at here is that Eat the Elephant was very much worth the wait. If you're a Perfect Circle fan, I think you're really going to enjoy this project, or at least some of this project. Like I said, it definitely is their most mellow project to date, but given A Perfect Circle and their previous music, that really shouldn't be all too surprising to some people. I know I've seen some people complaining about that online and such, but, I found that, their earlier works were definitely rather mellow for the most part. But yeah, if you're a fan of this band, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this album to some extent. If you're a fan of like alternative rock, alternative metal, progressive rock, all those kinds of sounds, I think you'll find something to enjoy here on this project. It's overall just a very solid listening experience. I had a lot of fun listening to this thing. And I definitely would recommend listening to this album at least once, just not doing anything else. I know personally myself, lots of times when I'm listening to music, I do, do other stuff while I'm listening, just because I have so much other stuff that I need to do. I don't have a lot of time sometimes to just, sit down and listen to an album and nothing else. But I decided to do that with this album because I thought it would be interesting just given the sound of the project. And, when you're paying a lot of attention to what's going on here, I feel like the album becomes, even better than it already is. So I definitely would recommend doing that with this project. This is definitely an album that deserves 100% of your attention, just to really take in all that it's giving you. And if you do take in everything that's giving you, you'll definitely get a lot of good stuff out of it. So yeah, I would highly recommend this album, and it was definitely worth the wait. But, that's just my own personal opinion. Feel free to leave yours down in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on other future album reviews, music-related content, things of that sort. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.